where we get to hear about how the sausage gets made in the legislature. And we've got two wonderful legislators with us. Um, Pat McGee, unfortunately, was called away at the last minute and can't join us this time. We'll have to soldier on without her, but we do have Representative Tony Kaplan and Senator Deborah Altschuler with us. And this is going to be a wonderful panel. And before I introduce our speakers, let's just recall that this event takes place in Ndakina, the ancestral homeland of the Abenaki, Pennacook, and Wabanaki peoples, past and present. We acknowledge with gratitude this land, the waterways, and the people who have stewarded Ndakina throughout the generations. And this event is being recorded. Everybody who registered will receive a link to the recording when it's ready. And if the speakers are willing to share their slides, then you'll get a set of slides as well. As always, please everybody remember to stay on mute, and please drop your questions in the chat. We'll have plenty of time for audience questions. So first, I'll briefly introduce our guests, and let's see. So we've got Senator Deborah Altschuler with us, who represents Senate District 24, which includes Exeter, Hampton, Rye, and Stratham. From 2016 to 2022, she served in the House of Representatives for the Rockingham 19 district, and in 2023 was elected to the Senate, and she has served for this past year in the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. In addition, we've got Representative Tony Kaplan, who lives in Henniker, represents Merrimack 8th District, has served as chair of the Henniker Energy Committee and Henniker Town Committee, and in this past year has been a member of the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee. So welcome to you both. So great that you're here, willing to share your wisdom and experience with us. And we'll start with Representative Kaplan, I think, if I can.
That'd be great. Yeah, I'll talk you through my beauties and beasts if you're ready.
Excellent. So let me see if I can open this up. Aha, okay, awesome. Very good.
Well, I'll start by saying it's an honor to be here with New Hampshire Network. I'm talking to you from St. Johnsbury, Vermont. I came up to see the eclipse. So forgive my very public setting here. I'm just on the main street of St. Johnsbury, Vermont. And so I thought we'd start with the beasts. These are the ones we definitely don't want to see pass. And that's maybe your favorite legislator, your favorite climate denying legislator who shall remain nameless on the floor of the legislature, denying the science.
Let me know when you want to change.
Yeah, go ahead to start us off here. The first one is HB 1036. And it's got the benign title of cost effectiveness of system benefits charge. And this has to do with the New Hampshire SAVES program, which is the utility managed, utility run energy efficiency program that is a great benefit to the state. And basically the background to this bill is a couple of years ago, there was a great 3-year budget for the New Hampshire SAVES, which was unexpectedly axed by the Public Utilities Commission, and which set off great chaos, great pushback on the part of a lot of people in New Hampshire, especially the business community, people involved in energy efficiency work. So the legislature stepped in, set the next 3-year budget, and also set the tests by which cost effectiveness of the program can be determined by the Public Utilities Commission. And so after a long process, a PUC docket with testimony from all sides, the Granite State test was set up as the test for determining cost effectiveness. And so what this bill does is basically a second bite at the apple for people who basically just don't believe that the state should be subsidizing energy efficiency work for either private businesses or private residences. So the fear is that by this enabling legislation, which will allow the PUC to look at other tests starting in 2027, that will be the camel's nose in the tent, so to speak, of doing away with energy efficiency programs. So we don't want to see that happen. We need more energy efficiency, not less, as we know. It's great benefit to the state. For every dollar that's invested in energy efficiency programs, there's a $3 or $4 benefit economically to the state. So we definitely don't want to see this program touched right now. So hopefully this will not pass in the Senate. No date set yet for the Senate hearings. Next one, please, Ryan Martin.
Yeah.
Oh, you
I
I think
skip
you
there?
skipped one. Yeah, you skipped one of the beasts.
Okay.
It's going the wrong way. That's a good one. There you go.
Okay,
So
here we
HB
go.
1623 has to do with state energy policy. This is, if the other one was the camel sticking its nose in the tent, this one is the camel stepping inside and saying, here I am. It's an extreme bill. It's an ideological statement. It's basically meant to scare off any sort of investment coming into the state to do renewable energy. It sets the state up for using its sovereign police power to defend and protect in-state power plants, fossil fuel power plants. This is for people who believe that the grid is being attacked, that we are being attacked by, you know, green tree-hugging ideologues that want to see our way of life destroyed. So it's based on fear, based on misinformation, a lot of paranoia. When Michael Vose, who's the prime sponsor, stood up to talk about it on the floor of the House, his first words were, "We are under attack." Basically, this is a, you know, they're flying the flag of extremist, protectionist, state rights, sovereign rights. You know, very dangerous bill. Nobody was in favor of it. Even the power generation plants came out and said it was just unworkable. The Department of Energy said it's unworkable. I have a fear that this will sail through because the prime sponsor is an influential Republican. But this is a very dangerous bill, so we should swing in against it if possible in the Senate. And again, no set date for it, for the hearing. So those are the two Bs. If you want to go on to the good bills, Ryan Mark. Okay, this is a good one. This is my bill, actually. I'm the prime sponsor, HB 1431. It sailed through the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee 20-0, and then it was on the consent calendar. So it's never been debated. It kind of flew under the radar. But it's an important bill. It reinstates the duty of the utilities to basically undergo integrated 10-year plans and submit those plans to the Public Utilities Commission. In that process, they have to forecast what their electrical demand will be for the next 10 years. And they have to take into account things like energy efficiency programs with the idea of maximizing the benefit of those energy efficiency programs. And my favorite is they have to take into account something called non-wire alternatives, which is everything we like: distributed energy generation, in other words, renewable power, microgrids, and all sorts of things that would allow them not to have to build out transmission and distribution infrastructure. So these are all things that save us money, and it's a good thing that they are going to, if this passes and becomes law, they are once again going to have to do this official, publicly accessible 10-year planning. Also, it restates our official energy policy as balancing the utilities' need to make a profit with the public's need to receive a beneficial service, including public health, including the environment, all those good things. So it's interesting. I don't know what the Senate's going to do. They have two diametrically opposed bills having to do with official state energy policy. Which one they choose to pass will be interesting to see. So we should come in favor of this one, obviously. Next, Reimer. This is I think is a great bill. I don't think anybody could be opposed to it. I think this will have an easy time in the Senate. HB 1499, establishing a study to implement a clean energy, community resilience and conservation core with the idea of putting young people on the path to clean energy and climate resilience career paths. So the idea is to deploy reliable clean energy, energy efficiency solutions, rebuild wetlands, manage forests, get young people involved in organic and sustainable agriculture. And it's not going to cost the state anything because it will be funded through public-private partnerships, including federal dollars from the Department of Labor, the Department of Energy. There's money coming from the Infrastructure Reduction Act. So it's not going to cost us anything. And right now, I think there's 10 states that have their state set up to be part of this program. And we want New Hampshire to also be one of those states. So hopefully everybody will come out in favor of that bill. Those are my main beauties and beasts. I have a category called also the best of the rest. And these are good bills, but they're slightly flawed. They had flaws, so I couldn't really put them in the category of beauties. So Reimar, if you want to go on to those. Best of the rest. This is an important bill. This is a Senate bill that's coming to us. We've had the public hearing, SB 391, having to do with interconnection. Right now, one of the problems that's holding up the energy transition to clean energy is the fact that there's a big bottleneck. There's a traffic jam, a backlog of projects that can't interconnect to the grid because the utility has been dragging its feet because there's no clear rules. So they did a study. They spent a year taking testimony from all sorts of people, and they came out with no recommendations after that study. So what we're asking them to do is please take that study and set up the rules ASAP. The bill came from the Senate with no deadline for the rulemaking. So we're waiting for an amendment to come next week, and this week, before our executive session next week, which will hopefully have a deadline for the rulemaking. If that amendment comes through, it has a good deadline, I think we should be in favor. I think everybody should be in favor of this bill for electric interconnection. And then I've got, I think, one more, Reinmar. This is SB 451 for an expedited track on the site evaluation committee process for power plants that basically have already gone through the site evaluation committee and are, have been certified, have their have everything checked off in terms of health impacts, environmental impacts, and say they want to repower, they want to repurpose to wind energy or solar energy or battery storage or something like that. They shouldn't have to go through the entire site evaluation committee process. So it's basically the same process, just with shortened deadlines. Everything's been cut in half. So if it was 120 days, it's now 60 days. There was some pushback from the departments saying that some of these deadlines would not be workable for various reasons. So there's been a committee set up and they are drafting an amendment with deadlines that will be acceptable to everybody. And so if that happens and we see the amendment before the executive committee, again, this is another bill I think that we should be in favor of. There were some people that came out and said, oh yeah, so that's about it for that one. Reimar, we can go on to the next one if you want. This one, it didn't come through our committee, our committee, but it's an important bill from Representative Rebecca McWilliams on housing codes, and it passed through I think it was the ED&A committee, the executive departments and administration committee, and they said, yes, that's fine. We will update the building codes, but we'll strip out the energy efficiency codes. So it came to the floor of the House. Rebecca McWilliams put in an amendment saying, please put back the energy efficiency codes. That amendment failed on the floor of the House, and it's now going to the Senate as is with no energy efficiency codes. And that endangers us because New Hampshire will lose out on federal dollars that are available to update and implement our energy efficiency codes. So we want to see an amendment in the Senate, hopefully, to add those back in. And if that happens, we should be in favor of this because, housing is a big issue in the state, and we want our housing stock to be, to be working for us and not against us in terms of greenhouse gases and heating costs and public health, and also grid load, because we're going to be trying to electrify all our home heating. And if they're not insulated to the standards that are necessary, we're going to be using electricity that we shouldn't have to use. So that's it for my beauties and beasts, Reinmar. I'm happy to take questions. if there are any.
Yeah, Tony, I may not have understood you completely. The first two bills, the Bs, 1036 and 1623, have they passed the House, both of them?
Yes, they have both passed the House. That's why we're talking about them. They're both
Okay.
on the way to the Senate. There is no date for a Senate hearing as of yet, but they're in the crossover process.
Okay.
Does anybody have any other questions for Tony? I have a question actually. I'm wondering about about 1059. In the text, it talks a lot about various international codes, and I'm just curious what those actually are. There's like an international plumbing code. There's international building code. What are those codes?
I mean, that is a very good question. I do not know the body that is responsible for drawing those up. It is an international code. You know, I don't know the body, Ryan. That's a good question. I don't have the answer to that.
Mm.
It's not.
Would it
It's
be,
it's
something with
something that we
Canada?
already have adopted, though. They're widespread and they are in use in our country, but they are called international codes. So you know.
I wonder if that means it's like together with Canada, same codes as what Canada's using.
That's a very good question. I just assumed in my mind that they came from Europe, but I don't really know the answer to that.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Cool. Well, the other question that I have actually is about 391, Senate 391. I was just curious why there were no recommendations after that study was done. Seems very strange to do a study but not produce anything in terms of recommendations.
Yeah, it is very strange. They spent a year taking testimony from all stakeholders, and they issued a report, and the report is basically a transcription of all the hearings with no final set of recommendations, and so it's very frustrating for us. And that's why we don't want to put this bill through with no deadlines, because it seems like there's just more opportunity for them to drag their feet on this process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. One of those things that's hard to figure out from outside, I guess. Lois has got a question. Lois, go ahead.
Thank you. Representative, I have a question about a different bill that has been presented, 496. Would you take a question on that?
If you could tell me, what is that, one of the bills I just
It's
discussed, or is
the
that some other?
New Hampshire Healthcare Workers for Climate Action Bill around reestablishing a department under Health and Human Services of climate health and preparedness.
Yeah, I
It's
haven't seen that bill,
fine.
so I don't really want to comment on it. It sounds like a great idea, and if that group is behind it, I'm sure it's it's well worth having a look at for sure.
Well, I believe the House okayed it, but the Senate defunded it for all intents and purposes. I was just wondering if there's any hope of funding it now that it's come back to Health and Human Services under the House, and if not, what are some thoughts about having an unfunded department sitting there because it has to currently under Senate. Senator Altshuler knows about this, under Senate amendment to absolutely not use state funding. So anybody that can help with that, any comments?
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like
very
it's more a
concerning.
question for the senator. If it was
Okay.
a Senate bill, she probably would have more insight. Senator Altshuler would know why the funding was stripped out on that bill. So I would ask her.
Okay, thank you very much.
Well,
Thank you.
thanks, Lois. And maybe that's a good segue to Senator Altshuler. Deborah, do you have some slides? Do you want to go ahead and you're muted, but you can go ahead and share.
Hello. I do not have slides. I reached my
Okay.
capacity on my output, but I do have some information about the bills that you brought to my attention, Reinmar. And also, quick question, Lois, what was the bill number on the one you just asked?
Sorry,
459.
496.
496. Okay, I'll try to dial around to that at the end.
Thank you.
Okay, so I have some updates. Senate Bill 543, which was establishing the State Environmental Adaptation, Resilience, and Innovation Council. And that will establish a council that will foster proactive planning and risk management strategies across the state agencies to navigate environmental changes effectively. The proposed council's composition includes representatives from various sectors to ensure comprehensive planning and informed decision-making. And additionally, the bill promotes collaboration and cost savings to protect New Hampshire taxpayers' investment in infrastructure. So it will work to address the public health and tourism recreation economies and reaffirm that the council recognizes the exclusive role of the legislature in enacting policy through legislation and mandates approved by legislators and the governor on the solicitation and use of grant funds. So there was a little bit of stepping on toes where so there's a couple of things that in the way things are play out. The governor can have an executive action. That's one thing. The legislature can pass a law, which the governor can then sign or veto. And then some things are more macro, and the micro details are sent to another committee called GELCAR, and I don't remember what the acronym stands for. However, it is a bicameral and commission-laden committee where the rules of, how we're going to execute some of these laws are put forward. So there was some stepping on toes of the legislature. So this commission is designed to, not only look at environmental adaptation, resilience, and innovation, but also remind other stakeholders that when it comes to seeking out government grant money from the federal government, that belongs in the hands of the legislature. And so there you are. And it passed on a voice vote. I am a co-sponsor of that. And but it also does give, I will say it does, the money ask has to come from the legislature through a department. However, there is an opportunity for nonprofit groups to work in collaboration with departments on getting federal money, particularly if they're going to be part of the distribution. So in any event, that is headed over, that is Senate Bill 543, and that is on its way over to the House. The next one is Senate Bill 386, which is establishing a committee to study power generation, transmission, distribution, and storage. And the proposed committee will focus on those 4 topics, reflecting the dynamic nature of the energy sector, emphasizing an inclusive study. It covers power generation sources, necessity assessment, cost exploration, and the latest in storage capacity research. The bill, it was amended, and the only thing the amendment does is bring the number of senators who are on the committee from 2 to 1. And there was support from the Nature Conservancy, which was great. Appreciated that. We got no opposition. However, the Department of Energy was neutral, and they made a point of letting us know that they were neutral. However, they will be required to participate. So that also passed on a voice vote and is headed over to the House. So more good news. Senate Bill 390 relative to defining a critical habitat. This bill is to redefine critical habitat in statute, aligning with existing rules and federal guidelines for endangered or threatened species. It also addresses concerns related to shifting habitats and species ranges due to environmental changes. While proponents stress the importance of planning for the future and considering project species ranges, New Hampshire Fish and Game opposed the bill, expressing concerns about making regulations more rigid and less flexible. We also got pushback from the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association and the Association of Builders and Contractors. So that has been shifted to an interim study. So there'll be a hearing over the summer, most likely in June. And unfortunately, with interim study, it can result in a recommendation for further legislation, or it would be a polite way to kill it. So we are looking at it as a way to open the door to future legislation for next year. So that one's going to be, but that one's kind of like on hold. It didn't help that we didn't get a lot of support in the committee. And I will take a brief aside to clarify about about providing support. So there are a couple of ways that you can support legislation or oppose legislation. And one of them is to show up in Concord and log in your support or your opposition in person with testimony or just signing in. Now, understanding that that's not feasible for everybody to leave your work or be able to arrange for childcare or elder care to come up to Concord for what could be a 45-minute hearing or a 15-minute hearing, depending. I understand that's not possible. Luckily, we do have, they are live streamed on YouTube, so you can watch the whole thing, and you can request, you can sign in online, which we really encourage, and you can submit your testimony online, also really encourage. However, when the Senate legislative aides write the committee reports, which you can see on the general court website, there are, as you look at a committee's hearing report, you will see the list of sponsors and co-sponsors. And then under that, you will see how many people, you will see a line of how many people signed in support and how many opposed. And then there is a list of people who showed up to deliver testimony or people whose testimony was submitted into the record. And there are two ways to do that. Those emails that you send are not necessarily submitted into the record unless you ask them to be. So when I have friends like you all who want their testimony to be submitted into the hearing report and into the record, you need to let us know because we actually have to either move that the chair accept testimony from the following people, and I'll have copies of the emails and that gets submitted into the report, or as I have done with Senator Rebecca Perkins Quokka, we actually will take your email and go sit at the testimony table and deliver your email as testimony so that it gets entered into the record. So those emails that you send to us individually, excellent, but unless you ask that for that to specifically be entered into the record, it is it is a communication to your legislator. So just wanted to clarify that because that came as a surprise this year to a lot of people.
Great, Senator Altshuler. If somebody wants to do that, what exactly do they need to do? Send you an email, or who would they? Anybody in the committee? Who would they write to if they want to have it submitted into the record?
So there are a couple of things you can do. If they're like, so I am on the Energy and Natural Resources Committee. So you have, I am there. I am not on the Transportation Committee, nor am I on the Commerce Committee. So I'm not able to run to those committee rooms to submit that. However, you can request your particular senator print your email out and enter it into the record for a particular bill. Your senator, you don't, maybe not be supportive of your point of view, and you may not trust that that happens, and I don't blame you. But you can send it to a member of the committee, and every committee, if you look on the general court website and you go to the standing committees, you'll see that every committee has a legislative aide. And that aide is the researcher and is the person who writes those hearing reports that you see on the general court website. So for the Energy Committee, our legislative aide, his name is Philip Tatro, and that his email address is right on the committee's front page. And just say, you know, dear Mr. Tatro, I would like to have this email submitted into the record as part of testimony for Senate Bill ABCDE. And that can be done as long as it is prior to the hearing. Once the hearing's over, it's too late. So.
Yeah. Great, thank you. It sounds
a-
like the easiest way is simply to look for the legislative aid, the
Yeah.
respective one for whatever committee is relevant, and then send it to that person directly. And one doesn't have to then involve any of the senators necessarily or anybody else.
No, and
that correct?
there is an opportunity when you choose the option to email the entire committee, that aide also gets the email. So you are getting your email to the entire committee and requesting that it be entered into the hearing record.
I see. Great. Thank you.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So the
Very
last
good. That's
bill I have on my request list here, or actually I've got two. One more is House Bill 1145. And this is prohibiting the private ownership of landfills. And that is coming over. I'm a co-sponsor of that too. And that is coming over from the House. And that passed in the House on a 208 to 162 roll call vote. So I think it was a roll call. Nonetheless, it was, it was not that close, but close enough that gives you an idea that it was partisan. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. And if that is something that you are passionate about, please, put your 2 cents together for House Bill 1145, which is prohibiting the private ownership of landfills. And then there was a question about House Bill 1059, which is the building energy codes. And that is actually, so that passed through the House already, as you heard from Representative Kaplan. And it will be heard in the Executive Departments and Administration Committee, not the Energy Committee, actually. So it's going to go to ED&A on Wednesday, April 10th at 9 a.m. And indeed, the only thing that is not updated to the 2021 codes is electric. So, and that's problematic because I don't have that note right in front of me. So there's a lot of misinformation floating around, and as there always is with these kinds of bills. But there are a series of codes that are called the International Building Codes, and those are all outlined in this bill. And the International Building Codes is actually a U.S. non-governmental membership organization that is it is not, so it's it's an NGO, and it is a compilation of building engineers, firefighters, designers, architects, builders. So they all join this council yeah, it's a council. It's called the IBC, the International Building Code Council, IBCC. And they write these standards that then become the International Building Code. And those standards are updated with frequency. And then what happens is that those standards are then used by the federal government for project bids. So if you want to do a federal project, you will most likely have to meet the latest of international building codes. And then there's a secondary use for the international building codes by the federal government, which is in their awarding of grants to the states. So we are looking at some housing. We are looking at a significant housing shortage here in New Hampshire. And so we need all the help we can get with building more units, because we are going to need somewhere in the vicinity of 60,000 within the next 18 months, I believe. So we have that in front of us. And I can give you a little backstory on where this all came from afterwards, but nonetheless, we are getting some pushback because what came over from the House is that the New Hampshire Building Code would be adopting the international codes of 2021. Right now, our codes, anyone who's building right now only has to build to the 2018 codes. So that's the floor. It is not the ceiling. Anyone can build higher, but you can't go any lower. So the reference is 2021. And that is 2021 on existing building codes, plumbing codes, mechanical codes, swimming pool and spa codes, the residential code. And then the only thing that has been left out is energy conservation code. So energy conservation code, as it came over from the House, will be stuck at 2018, and everything else goes up to 2021. And so the reason, so we will be, like Representative Kaplan said, we will be looking to put an amendment in to include the energy conservation code acceleration to 2021. So one of the most compelling reasons to do that I would say one of the most compelling reasons to do that is that there is federal housing money available for New Hampshire, and our Department of Environmental Services has already submitted a intention to apply. So there's the intention to apply application or letter of intent, and then there's the actual application. So it's two parts. So the state of New Hampshire has already indicated to the federal government that they would like to access the money that has been set aside. And this is one of Senator Shaheen's biggest pushes. This is something that she is a real leader on. And so she has secured $4.2 million that can be used for residential building or modification. However, there are stipulations, and one of them, you could access all the money if you were building up to a net zero building code. As you can imagine, there are not that many people who are developers and builders who are choosing to use net zero as their goal. There are people who are doing that in some aspects of their building, but not all. So in order to even to get half of the money, the 2.1 million would be to bring all of our codes up to the 2021 standard. My dog is also a real environmentalist. That's right. Yes, we are lifting codes. So in any event, if we don't bring the energy standard code up to 2021, then we don't get any of this money. Zero. So we are
Mhm.
going to be leaving $2 million on the table. And that $2 million is most specifically in the space of training municipalities, developers, the state commission and committees and everybody on what the 2021 standards are and how do you inspect for them? How do you draw plans for them? How do you build for them? All of that. So this money is used for teaching everybody how to do that and get the entire state in all sectors, government and private, up to speed. We don't get to do any of that if we keep the energy code at 2018. The minimum for accessing this federal money is to bring your code up to 2021. So we really, if you are so inclined, any support you could lend on Wednesday towards, supporting that bill, which again is House Bill 1059, and it's going to be heard in the Senate Executive Department and Administration Committee on Wednesday at 9 o'clock. 9 o'clock. So yeah, that's where we stand right there. And so the pushback that we are getting from the Home Builders Association is that it's going to cost so much money, and we can't front that kind of money on the project, and we're not going to see any return on that investment, which is all hooey, just absolute nonsense, because the developers and the builders are not going to be the property managers. There is find me a developer and a builder who then is also subsequently the property manager. That is not a thing. They are going to be selling that property, and they're going to be selling it to a housing authority, for instance, or a housing authority has contracted to build this, or they're going to be selling it to a municipality for low-income housing, or they're going to be selling it to a private management company. And the fact of the matter is that in order for anyone to use those properties, they're going to have to pay for the electricity, and they're going to have to pay to heat that thing. And if their energy conservation is not been addressed on the front end, it will be addressed in how that place is heated and lit up. And that is where the issue comes in, because there are other governmental agencies that get funding from the federal government, like for our LIHEAP, right? And for our community CAP programs and their fuel assistance programs, and our low-income housing first programs, where we are getting people who are evicted from their homes or are houseless right now, or experiencing domestic or sexual violence, and we're using a housing first program in so many spaces across the state. And it's great if you can get someone to a house, into an apartment or a house, but it's terrible if they can't afford to be there because they can't afford to heat it. And then they turn around and they ask for that help from another government agency. So it is just the snake eating its tail. And it's very similar to if you have been around some of these conversations before, it's very, very similar to the debate on raising the minimum age, because if companies are allowed to not have to have a minimum wage, then they won't, or their minimum wage is going to be far under the market. And then companies like Walmart, who specifically pay under minimum wage and then also schedule their employees for under full time so they don't have to pay them benefits, then those people turn around and use state funded services for their their heat, their electricity, their food insecurity, their underneath the, they're using state healthcare services. So when we hear the builders say that they're not going to make the money back, that's what I have to say to that. Like, okay, sure
Mhm.
you. So anyway, we're going to talk about that on Wednesday.
Great,
And
and that's awesome. Hopefully we can put our 2 cents worth in, because this
yeah,
is a
put
really
in 10 or
important
12
bill.
cents, like think big.
Yeah. We have a couple questions, Senator Altschuler.
Yes.
One of them is about this bill, and another one's about 496. But about this bill, I'm just curious, um, how different are the standards from 2018 to 2021? Do you know? I mean, can you generalize, briefly about that, or is it just a question
Yes.
of details?
Well, it is a question of details, but to make new housing more efficient, um, and actually I got some information for tonight, um, and I actually, spoke with Senator Shaheen's office about like where they're worried we're going to drop the ball. So if we were to bring our standards up to 2021, it would save the average new homeowner in New Hampshire about $537 annually on their utility bills, just compared to something billed a couple of years ago, or this past year, because the minimum standard is 2018. So that's a compoundable amount of money to be saving and not spending on LIHEAP and not spending on energy costs. The initial cost of construction, so a lot of the pushback is that the builders are saying it's too expensive for them to do, but the numbers that they're throwing out as being too expensive to do would be if their requirement were net zero. That is not what we are asking for. We are asking to go from 2018, 2 years later, to 2021. And that changes the cost of building in about the differentiation in costs for a single home is a $2,000 added cost in the
Mhm.
building. So we just passed legislation, and I wish I could remember the number, but or maybe it will be coming up on next week's consent calendar. But nonetheless, we had a hearing about how when you're doing new buildings and you have to have air purifiers, right? That you need to do the former minimum standard on new buildings is a recirculation of 3 times per hour, right?
Mhm.
Which is not a lot, really. That's really not a lot. And so the Senate actually took a position and raised it to 5 times an hour. So that is because it's better for public health. And you could argue that, having energy efficiency and keeping somebody warm is also better for public health. So in any event, there are, there's millions of dollars available to help us adopt this change from 2018 to 2021. But if we don't, then we lose the option. And our New Hampshire Department of Environmental Services has already put their letter of intent out. So I'm very interested to see what they come up with on Wednesday, because they've already said, well, we intend to do this, but they're going to have to leave that money on the table if we don't pass that bill with everything raising up to 2021. And I'll give you a little backstory on that one. So there's one Seacoast community, and I believe there are a couple of others around the state, but one particular Seacoast community passed a municipal ordinance that required any new buildings to reach the 2022 standards. And this was last year. And so last year, they were like, that's great. The state says 2018, but in this municipality, we say 2022. And so the builders and the plumbers and the electricians all got their knickers in a twist because they were worried that other more progressive municipalities who are also being rather proactive would do the same. And then that creates a differentiation between municipalities. So if you're building in one municipality and they are using the 2022 standards, that's a different standard than the 2018 that some other municipality is doing. And so because of that, they came to the state and they said, we need a uniform standard across the entire state because local control is great until it's not. And this is when it's not. So here we are. We're looking at a universal code across the entire state with with a raise to the 2021. And that was a battle to get there. It was a battle.
It
So
seems in some ways like it should be the 2022. Is that the latest one, 2022?
yes,
The latest set of standards?
yes.
So why are we not proposing going to that one?
Oh my goodness, why wouldn't we? That is an excellent question for which I also asked when we talked about this in the Senate. And that is just a bridge too far for the New Hampshire Home Builders Association, that the costs would be astronomical and we have a housing shortage and you want us to build all these units and who's going to buy them if it's going to cost so much more money and yada, 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 yada. So the compromise was to get it up to 2021. And that was, I was supposed to be universally understood as the minimum entry into getting the Inflation Reduction Act dollars. Like we will leave all that money on the table because that's the minimum, that's your minimum pay to play. If your state is not up to 2021, step back, leave that money for someone else. And New Hampshire is still smarting from having wasted the opportunity to use money during COVID. Like we left a lot of money on the table for being short-sighted. So we're trying not to do that again.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Thank you for all that info,
My
Senator. It's
pleasure.
really great. One more question before we have to close. Bruce is asking, why is there support for private ownership of landfills? I guess there's about 450, 459. Who's supporting that and what's
Casella.
the reasons for it? Is it basically Casella, huh?
Yes, it is Casella. That's why.
And do they own them now? Some of them?
Some of them, yes, some of them.
So they would then have to give up ownership.
Well, not necessarily because New Hampshire also has, it would be for any new landfills. We don't have a look back.
New ones.
When we pass a bill, we can't make it retroactive. So it would be for any new landfills going forward that it not be in the hands of, a group like Casella, for instance, who doesn't really care about where they pollute. Yeah. And they're also very, very heavily invested right now in bringing out of state trash into New Hampshire. And which, we get a little bit of taste of that, but not a whole lot. And it actually is hurting us because we're going to reach capacity at 2032, I think, 2032. So we are looking to put a moratorium. That's another thing is that we have a bill to put a moratorium on any new construction of landfills for the next 4 years. So there is a big push to do that. And I'm looking at 496. And let's see, Senate Bill 496 it passed on a voice vote.
Can
Oh,
I-
but it was
I-
amended. Okay.
I looked it up and the amendment is just that it can't be state funds. So yes, the bill is still being heard, I think on Wednesday. And just, if it's passed, they have to hunt around for money, but using Tony's expression, the nose is still under the camel's tent. And, so the bill is alive, they'll just have to hunt for money.
Right. So this is not an unusual way for the legislature to begin new initiatives, is to say, well, we're not going to put any money into it. And I'm looking at it and I see on page 2 in part 7, it says, implementation of the climate and health protection program shall be contingent on the availability of sufficient funding from non-state sources. No general funds shall be appropriated to the department for administration. The department shall seek and apply for any appropriate grants and federal funds. So yes, that is one way. However, I will say that Representative Kaplan couldn't have been more right. This is a nose under the tent, because many of these federal funded programs that allow for things like this to get off the ground require a state to have a little bit of skin in the game. And so they'll pay for 70% if we put in 30%. So what will happen is we'll be looking, once the department has identified where some money might be available, and we find out like, oh, actually it's not available to New Hampshire or anyone else for that matter, unless the state ponies up a percentage. And that is how we fund quite a few things in the state of New Hampshire, where, we put up a minor amount of money and then the match is the major amount of money. So it's a start. It's a start. So once we identify what money's out there, and then we find out what the parameters are on securing that money, that's when amendments come into, well, it's time to amend, Senate Bill 496, because there is money, but we can't access it unless the general fund kicks in, like there's 7 million available, but we got to kick in 1 million.
Great.
it's a
Senator
start.
Deborah Altschuler, thank you so much for generously taking time to speak with us. And we have just a few minutes, and Susan wants to talk a little bit about what's coming up. But I speak for everybody in saying thank you so much. We're very grateful that you could do this, Senator
Oh, it's my
Altschuler.
pleasure.
It's awesome. And Susan, do you want to? Okay, you're going to go ahead and do your screen sharing, Susan.
So let me say again, thank you for all you told us today, and thank you for what you're put through day in and day out, having to argue for us and combat some things that are less than truthful. And anyhow, you are here because this is New Hampshire Network, and we would like you to join in our efforts. I hope you'll hang on just for a few minutes, because I have important things to say about the bills that we just heard, but we do have working groups that we try and make action happen ourselves, sometimes at the local level, sometimes statewide. So there's a climate meeting happening this Wednesday, a working group. We have a legislation policy discussion every week with Chris Skoglund from Clean Energy New Hampshire. That's a lot of fun and as insightful as this evening's meeting. That's Fridays at 2. Municipal energy committees, that's the third Wednesday of the month. And speaking of building codes in 1059, if you go to our website on the page of past events, which is where we'll post this talk, there was one about building codes that Paul Bemis of the Energy Committee gave, and that will flesh out more about the importance of building codes. We've got a plastics meeting every other Sunday. The next one will be April 21st, an environment meeting on Wednesday, April 24th. To get all the Zoom links, times, dates, go to our website, which is easy to remember, New Hampshire Network spelled out .org. And we have a legislative spreadsheet that is updated weekly. I think what we've said is aligned with what we've heard tonight. I hope we didn't call any of them wrong, and we really talked to lots of people to make sure that what we're doing matches what the kind of advice we're hearing tonight. So again, that's on our website, and you'll see there it says New Hampshire bills. Finally, couple bills coming up, and Senator Altshuler and Representative Kaplan kind of took the high ground and didn't talk too much about the hijinks behind those beastly bills. But 391 is the interconnection bill, the puzzling bill that everyone says they would like our solar and our community power to be connected to the grid. There are businesses that have spent so much money on their arrays and they can't get connected. They're losing, in some cases, millions of dollars. The DOE is sitting on that, the Department of Energy, and we are asking you to ask your municipal energy committee to write to the Science, Technology, and Energy Committee and the Department of Energy to act on 391 so we can connect to the grid. That is having its executive session next Wednesday, April 14th. So please write by then. If we get a letter ready for you, a form letter template, we'll send it, but we don't yet. Before I go on to the next talk, we talked about 1059. We do have a letter. Go to our website where it says take action, and there's a letter there if you didn't already get it from us, to please right now ask your energy committee, your town manager, your town council to sign on and say, we need updated energy codes to get that money for housing and to make sure that we have homes that do not impoverish people with their utility bills or make them sick. So 2 actions for you there. And I think I am now going to let you go. Thanks, Reinmar. I'm done.
Thank you, Susan Richmond. And thank you, Senator Altshuler, and thank you for the audience for spending your time with us. And we look forward to hearing about your letters that you're going to send in support of these good bills and in opposition to the less good ones. Thank you all very much. See you next time. Cheers, everybody. Have a good night. Thank you, Deborah. All right. Awesome, Susan. Awesome conclusion there.
Mm.